Hello, everybody. Welcome to our front row series. I'm so excited, as always, for our author for this evening. As you are coming in, I just want to say welcome. Thank you for joining us this Wednesday evening and just get into some amazing conversation about literature and just inspirations. And hopefully, you will be inspired yourself to not only go and get these books for your home library, but also learn more about the author who wrote them. And so as you're coming in, this is a live conversation. So if you have questions or comments, put them in the chat. I'll be sure to share them. And when we get to our Q&A towards the end, I will pose questions that the audience gives. And then we also are blessed to have Natasha do a live reading of her book, which will be one of the books that we're raffling off. We are also offering in our book raffle a second book as well, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But thank you. I see more people coming in. We're going to join right in and get into the conversation. Again, if you have any comments, any questions, put them in the chat. Want to say hi to Natasha. We will make sure that it is shared. So we're going to just jump right in, which I love for every conversation. First, hello, Natasha. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
I am awesome. I love these opportunities because as I work with children and I'm a teacher as well, nothing makes a child's face light up as when they see a name on a book and then actually see the person behind it. Just the idea of like, wow, this is actually an individual and just hearing their stories. And so I love this series because it gives our families the opportunity to learn about their favorite authors. And so I would love to hear just the beginning, like what started you on this path of being an author. Let's a little bit of your background.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to share with you guys. As you said, reading is such an important thing for families, for kids, and it really makes a difference when you can kind of make those connections to yourself and your life personally. And so that's kind of where I started. I was lucky enough to grow up in a household where both of my parents really valued books. So we had books everywhere in our house. Our parents, I have 3 siblings. I'm the oldest. I have 2 sisters and a brother. And our parents would read to us at bedtime. And we had a really strong relationship with books. The other thing, and I always tell this story, my mom has been such a strong inspiration for me in terms of starting my own writing career because she used to write when we were kids, and she would write these little stories about the things that we did or the things that we were curious about or the things that we imagined doing. And I'm not going to tell you my age, but this was at a time when there were even fewer books that featured African-American kids available. Mm-hmm. And so her writing these stories about us really helped us to see ourselves in that space, in the space of a story, in the context of a book. So that really, I think, helped me along the way in terms of really connecting personally with not only reading, but also the process of writing. The other thing is I was a really shy kid, so I spent a lot of time with books just in general. So, this was the way that I sort of explored my own imagination. And I started writing when I was 7. So this was also a way for me to express myself, to find my voice. I got a lot of good feedback from my teachers and my parents about writing. And it was just something that I was encouraged to continue doing and that has continued to be a part of my life. So I've done a lot of different things in my career, in my school, my education, but writing has been the consistent theme and stream throughout my life.
I love it. And you hit on something that I think is so important and why I chose the 2 books that I chose for our book raffle, and what you just said about your mother, right? Writing these stories and having you as the protagonist, which was not a common thing when it came to children lit, for us to see ourselves, right? Not only on the front cover, but as like the main character of a story. And so even, as we'll get to, I love my hair, but I think that even that lends to this question, what are the inspirations for the story that you write? Because I think now it is pretty common, right? To see books that, are praising our hair, and you see a cover with, I'm enough with the big afro and,
Right.
hair love, all those things, but that was not commonplace, right? And even as I am picking books for our children in our book clubs and things like that, I'm always reminded that this wasn't, even when I was a child, the norm to see
Right.
books that look like us. So I would love to hear, what are the inspirations for the story that you write? Because you've written so many, like thinking about, do you find yourself like, man, this is what I purposely want to put out here when I write?
Well, it is kind of that. I mean, I have an underlying mission throughout all of my work, which is to tell stories that really celebrate Black kids and that encourage Black children first and foremost to think about themselves in a very big way and to imagine really big possibilities and stories. I mean, because you look at stories that feature Caucasian or other protagonists, and it's like a broad gamut of, it could be magical, it could be real, it could be, sad, or it could be, just something, it's the whole gamut. And I think for us, we still have a ways to go in terms of the kinds of stories that are told and that are put out there by us. There have been statistics and studies that have come out that show that of all the books that are published about or feature African Americans, less than half of those are written by African Americans. So we still have a ways to go in terms of telling our story. And what I hope for us is not to always feel that we have to interact and engage with an external lens, but really look at what we have as a culture, what we have as families, who we are individually, and allow our stories to really come out of that and inspire the books that we write, the stories that we read, the stories that we demand that come out about and for us. So I don't know if that was convoluted, but
no, was it?
Really the inspiration to sort of get that going, where we not only, are seeing ourselves represented, but we're kind of shaping what that representation is.
I love it.
And broadening that for ourselves.
Yeah, because I think even you saying that makes me think about, we definitely see an increase, right, in literature that has, African Americans as far as the central person or on the cover. But I believe what you said is so true, that what is the story though, right? I feel like even in those stories, some of them are starting to become a little pigeonholed. Like we're not just this, so we're not just that, like you said, it would be amazing to have, more sci-fi, and I know more of that is coming out, and just different types of stories that highlight, I think what represents our village as African American. When you think about your writings, is there a particular book for you that comes like, this is an example of what that means for me as far as my writing? Does any of your stories stick out that way?
Well, I think there's an element of that in all of my stories. I have to admit, like with I Love My Hair and the Bippity Bop Barbershop and I Love My Haircut, which is the board book iteration of that, I feel like those were more issue centered, but even with that, it was a way of kind of approaching that topic that was celebratory, that was joyful, that was whimsical, that I really wanted to extend an invitation for kids to imagine themselves and to celebrate all these things that they that make them unique, and to imagine, use their imaginations and create, different possibilities around those things. My middle grade mystery, The Harlem Charade, that's one that I really enjoyed writing because I lived in New York for many years. I'm currently based in Chicago. But I saw what was happening. I lived in Harlem, and there's such a rich history with Harlem, with the Harlem Renaissance, with African American arts and culture in general. And I see that there's the gentrification that was happening when I lived there, and that has continued to this day. And I really wanted to write something that explored that celebrated that history, and also that was just fun to read. So that was one too. So for me, it's always kind of weaving those things together.
Yeah.
You know, you can tell a story that has some substance and meaning, that's still just a good story. So it's, for me, it's all of those things.
I love it. And me too, I love my hair. So as we prepare for the live reading, can you kind of share with us when you wrote this story, what was your hopes? I know you hint to it, just about the imagination that comes with it, but as we're about to hear you read, what are some of the things that you want our listeners to kind of key in as they're listening?
Well, I'll go back to my mom again. So the origin of the story was my own hair combing experiences. And so this was a time that was sort of a love and hate experience for me. As I said, I had 3 siblings. And so this was a time when my mom combed my hair that I had her all to myself. So it was a very special time for the 2 of us. Of course, it wasn't always pleasant to have my hair combed. So my mom made up a game where we would pretend like there were people who were living in my hair. And we would make up all of these stories about these various characters as we went through my hair. So as she got to a tangle, we'd start talking about, Miss Broy, what's she doing today? And all these characters. And so when I wrote I Love My Hair, that component didn't necessarily make it in, but that idea of Kiana, the protagonist, going throughout, imagining all of these different things that she associates with her hair, the core of that, the heart of that came from that experience. And so when I read this book at schools or talk to kids about it, I always encourage them to think about how they might imagine their own hairstyles, and there are different literary techniques in here. There's similes and metaphors. My hair is soft as cotton, or, things like that. So I always encourage kids to think about how they can use words in a very visual way to create a picture. So that's the craft side of it.
Yeah.
Just the general overall creativity and thinking about yourself and your hair in all of these magical ways sort of was at the foundation.
I love it. And so before we go into our reading, I want to just say a couple of things. So as you are listening to Natasha, I will be putting in the chat. We are doing a book raffle. So as she's reading, we have bought copies of not only I Love My Hair, but I Love My Haircut. And you will be able to enter to get a copy of that for your family and for your home library. Also, after this, we'll have a few more questions, but we'll be taking questions from the audience. So if you have a question you want to pose or a comment you want to make sure is shown, I will make sure that happens. Before we go into reading, we do have a couple of comments I want to highlight. So we have a hi. So hi, Corinne. Nice to see you have joined us. And then we have a Miss Cream who says, hello, I am super excited for this reading. I have 2 young boys, and she has 2 young boys who will be listening in. So we are so excited as well. And since we highlighted, she says, yay! So awesome. I'm going to pull out so we'll be able to listen to Natasha. And again, in the chat, you all enter your name so you'll be able to win a copy.
All right, guys, I'm going to ask you to bear with me. I was telling Jarima that I'm in a new setting, so I have not used my computer in this particular setting, but I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to read to you I Love My Hair. I'm going to try to show you these pictures so that you can see them. So this book was illustrated by Evie Lewis, who's a wonderful illustrator. We've done 2 other books together, and I recommend his work highly, so check out other books that he's illustrated as well. Every night before I go to bed, Mama combs my hair. I sit between her knees, resting my elbows on her thighs like pillows. Mama is always gentle. She rubs coconut oil along my scalp and slowly pulls a comb through my hair. But sometimes it still hurts. So there she is, getting her hair combed. Her face isn't looking so happy. When Mama gets to especially tangled places, I try my hardest not to cry, sucking in my breath and pressing my hands together until they're red. This is probably how I looked when I got my hair combed. If you guys are having a hard time seeing the pictures, please let Jarima or put it in the chat. Let us know so I can try to make adjustments. But a few tears always manage to squeeze out. Mama, stop, I cry when I can't stand the comb tugging at my hair any longer. When I showed this picture to a little boy at another school, school I was visiting, he said, well, if you turn it upside down like this, it kind of looks like a volcano hairstyle. So I'd love to hear what you think about that. And if you have any other ideas for what that hairstyle or any of the hairstyles that you see might be. Mama puts the comb down and rubs my hurting places. Then she leans in close to me like she has a big secret to tell. Do you know why you're so lucky to have this head of hair, Kiana? She asks. I shake my head no. Because it's beautiful and you can wear it in any style you choose. I can spin your hair into fine, soft yarn, just like our grandmothers did at their spinning wheels, and weave it into a puffy little bun. If you guys have any ideas for stories that have spinning wheels in them, let me know. Put them in the chat. Can you think of any stories that have spinning wheels? Or I can part your hair into straight lines and plant rows of braids along your scalp, the way we plant seeds in our garden, then wait and watch for them to grow. Does anyone know what we call these braids? They have a special name. Let me know. In the morning before we walk to the store, Mama adds colorful beads to the ends of my braids. The beads click to the rhythm of my walk, helping me remember what we're going to buy. Tap, tap, clicky, clacky, milk, bread, peanut butter. Folks on the street look at me and smile as I dance along to the tap, tap, clicky, clacky music my hair makes just for me. Some days I just let my hair be free, to do what it wants, to go any which way it pleases. Then my hair surrounds my head like a globe. This is my Afro style. Once when I wore it, the kids at school teased me. My head felt heavy and I let it hang down low. But my teacher made me feel better. She said that when she was growing up, folks counted their hair as a blessing. Wearing an afro was a way for them to stand up for what they believed, to let the world know that they were proud of who they were and where they came from. I love my hair because it is thick as a forest, soft as cotton candy, and curly as a vine winding upward, reaching the sky and climbing toward outer space. Today I'm wearing it in my favorite style of all, 2 ponytails that stick out on either side of my head and flap in the air like a pair of wings. One of these days I just might take off and fly. And that is the end of I Love My Hair.
Yay! Awesome, awesome, awesome. I had pulled up, people were saying things in the comments, and when you had the one picture that my son, so much. I'm so tongue tied. I'm so excited. So first in the comments, when you had the picture, which was really cool, when it has the braids going backward,
Yeah.
someone was like, "What is that?" And they're like, "Oh, cornrows." And
Yeah.
and then as you were reading, my son's like, "We've read that book before." I'm like, "Of course we have." But we do have a few comments in the chat and questions that I'll make sure that I pose towards the end. But thank you so much for that live reading.
Sorry about the weird like picture showing.
Oh, it is totally fine, totally fine. And so I would love, so you mentioned, which I'm excited, E.B. Lewis, because I love his illustrations.
Yeah,
He's actually going to be someone I get to interview in the new year.
oh,
So
nice.
yeah, so I'm excited because he just does so much work. But I know you spoke about your Harlem Charade book because you lived in Harlem, and I know, you told a little bit the background about I Love My Hair. What is really like your creative process? Do you, just kind of like, hey, how do you get the ideas that come for your writings? Is it, like you said, more so reminiscing of times when you were younger or where you're living? Like, what has kind of been your process with writing?
It's very different for each idea. Sometimes an idea will come, like, for example, with the Harlem Charade, as you said, I was living there and I was walking down the street one day, and there was an artist. His name is Brett Disney, no relation to Walt Disney, but he was a young Black man, and he was making all of these portraits of residents from Harlem, and he would put them up on walls, on scaffolding, on construction sites. And these portraits were people talking about what their relationship to the community was, or at that time. And it was sort of this little reminder that these people were already here, that they live here, that this community is part of their lives. And so it was a really interesting experience for me just to be walking down the street, and suddenly, I'm about to cross the street and I'd look over and I'd see this big portrait of this person, and they were talking about their experience in Harlem. And that was very moving for me. And it made me realize that when we change communities, there's so much history that gets lost. So I started researching kind of art in Harlem and came up with an exhibit that happened at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which is not in Harlem, but that in the late 60s had an exhibit of Harlem artists. And that was a really big deal because Black artists really weren't invited to exhibit at the Met at that time. But it was also very controversial because the Harlem artists didn't feel that they had a say in how they were being represented. So there were only certain types of art that was being included. And so their kind of coming together led to the foundation of new institutions like the Studio Museum of Harlem and things like that. So this is all a roundabout way of saying that all of these things kind of come into the process. So the actual story that ended up coming out didn't center around those things, but all of those things were threads that sort of fed into like what the story was going to eventually be. And I always tell young writers, allow space for your ideas to evolve, because you might have a thought or a kernel of an idea and you'll start working on it and you'll be amazed at how many arms and shoots and all kinds of things that start to come out of this one idea. So I always kind of start with something that I'm interested in. I'm a very curious person. I explore all kinds of things. I love to just do things for the sake of doing them. A lot of times, like traveling or, learning how to do something that's really random, like knitting or cooking something, or foreign language. All of these things feed into your work. So I just say to be really open. And when I do have an idea, it usually is very straightforward in terms of like doing research, but then again, going back to that idea of allowing your idea to have room to evolve in and of itself. So I don't know that, and I usually, once I have an idea, I start working on it. I start writing it. I write a really bad first draft. And then that helps me to understand what the story actually is and how it's going to evolve. And that helps you to edit and really focus for the next draft.
I love it. So it's kind of like doing a brain dump, getting it all out so that you can later go back and and edit it. So I think it's yeah, go ahead.
No, I just say I really hate that process because I like things to be set. I like to be like, okay, this is what I'm writing about. This is what it's going to be, and I'm going to finish it at this time. And I love the idea of, I like I said, I'm a curious person. I'm always doing different things, but that idea of not being hinged yet or anchored in something is a very uncomfortable space. And I think a lot of writers and creative people have to learn how to be comfortable in that space where you're still exploring or things are still evolving. I'm not comfortable, but I have learned to be, I have learned to exist in that space because I feel like I'm in that space quite a bit because nothing ever comes easy.
I think this is a perfect, I know I said towards the end we would do Q&A, but there are some questions that are directly related to the book, so I want to just pull those up. So one of the questions that was asked is, what grade level is this book intended for? I read this to my first grade students years ago. So who would you say I Love My Hair is intended for the age?
I mean, it's technically, I guess, a K through second or third grade, depending on the reading level. I've read it with pre-K. I've read it with college students. So I think it's a book that lends itself to developmental, like technical aspects of developing reading skills and basic writing skills, like I was talking about similes and metaphors for very young kids. But some of the underlying themes are definitely themes that have been picked up by older readers. They can start to think about what it means to shape your identity. We can start to talk about culture and race in our society and use the book as a spring point for that. So I've been very fortunate. This book has, in 2018, it turned 20 years old.
Wow.
And it's still going strong, and people are using it in all those ways. I've also heard feedback from a lot of adoption agencies that it's used when there's like a transracial adoption to help kind of explore, African American culture if the parents are non-African American and they adopt an African American child. So I've been really fortunate that people have kind of found all of these ways to incorporate the book.
Oh wow, that's amazing. One more question we have is this a second version to the book? Because she did not have a page of when you had the afro, or was it in her copy? Do you know?
Oh, probably if you had the board book, one of the things they did was they took out that page, that spread with the parents and the African, clothing. And that was kind of an issue. It was a spatial decision because they had to cut a page. But, that's what they cut. So if you have the board book, you didn't get that spread.
Yeah, she said, oh, okay. Yeah, that's probably what it is. Yeah. So how long have you been a published author?
I published my first book in 1995. It was an anthology of writings that I edited by Black college students on self-identity and self-discovery, or Black identity and self-discovery. And I went to a predominantly white school. I went to Harvard undergrad. And I had a really tough time when I started there, just trying to figure out, where I fit in. I had been studying German actually since the second grade, and thought I would major in German when I got to college. And it was just this time for me of like all of these kind of, I guess college is a time when you're exploring all of these things about yourself, but I was really coming into my consciousness as an African American and what it meant for me to be on that campus. And I often felt a little bit isolated. There was a strong Black community there, but I wanted to have a stronger network. And so I have always used writing to sort of navigate my way through the world. And so I came up with the idea to do an anthology that would incorporate the writings of college students around the country. And that's what that book was. It's called Testimony. And it also includes writings by some very, very early writings by Ta-Nehisi Coates and others. So it became like a glimpse at a generation of writers at that time, at that point in time. It's out of print right now, but I am considering reissuing it. So
that sounds amazing. So with that, so you in 1995 published that. So was it difficult when I asked this question as far as like becoming, you know, because sometimes I interview authors, they're like, well, in the beginning, I just did self-publishing. And then I just continued to just do my work, and someone then saw me, or they were like, man, for years, I was trying to get my manuscript out, and then finally someone got me. And so many different stories. And I've also talked to authors like, actually, it wasn't that hard. I did this and I got my first book published. So for you, I know it was the anthology. Was it difficult to get a publishing company to, you know, take that anthology on?
I think I'm somewhere in the middle. I had a very serendipitous, I think, early start to my career in that when I was doing this anthology, part of the way that I was connecting with people was to literally reach out via, you know, letters or, you know, at the very early emails and all this stuff to anybody I could think of, to colleges, to Black student unions at different colleges around the country, to Black professors. And I sent the proposal to several publishers. They turned it down, but it just so happened that one of well, actually, Henry Louis Gates was coming to Harvard at the time that I was about to leave and that I was seeking a publisher. And he actually was very helpful to me in introducing me to a publisher. So I always say to people, you know, there are traditional routes that you can take that you should take advantage of, you know, submit your work, find an agent, you know, all those things. But it really does make a difference if you can start to make connections with people. It doesn't always pan out, but I think the more connections that you have, the more direct connections that you have with editors and publishers, it doesn't hurt, you know, in getting your work out there. I'm very interested in self-publishing. I published one novel. My mom and I actually worked on a novel together and we published a book, but it's very challenging, you know, in terms of distribution, in terms of
The
really
market,
publicizing your work. And so I really commend people who are able to do that, because I think it's a very good model as far as having control of your work, if you can do it in a way that's sustainable. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, just a couple more questions. My next question is just, what is your advice as we're coming towards the end for aspiring artists? I know you just shared about, like, you know, with this publishing process, but what would be, if you could give like one word to those who wanted to be authors as well, what would be your advice?
Going back to what I said earlier, cultivating a sense of curiosity.
Yeah.
So you may be interested in doing a certain kind of work or genre of work, but be a person that is very open to any number of things, you know, in terms of, like, if you were into hip hop or trying to do like hip hop music, listen to jazz, and I think hip hop artists are good at doing that, you know, listen to jazz, listen to all of these influences that have fed into this music, and find your own space you know, within that. But I think the more you have to draw from in terms of your knowledge, in terms of your aesthetic sensibilities, you know, looking at how artists write something, or how an artist sings, or how an artist paints, you know, you have this whole vocabulary that you can start to draw from as you create your own form of expression. So that's what I would recommend.
I love that. I love it. And what would you desire next in your career? Just, you know, I know you say you've been doing this for a while, but as you think about being, I mean, it doesn't even have to be something connected to writing. Is there something like, you know what, I've always wanted to do this, or I've always wanted to try this? I also want to say congratulations. I saw you were in the Netflix series with the, you know, with the readings, and I think that's again another platform that was not always readily available for us, and so that's amazing. But even seeing that, what do you desire, you know, next when it comes to your writing or anything else that comes to your mind?
Yeah, I definitely will be writing, I think, forever. You know, for as long as I'm here, I will be writing, no matter what. But if I, you know, if I had something else that I might want to do, it's, I mean, maybe it's kind of weird, but I think I'd be really interested in real estate. And like, I've been doing a lot
Okay.
of reading about Black towns and how
Yeah.
Black people created their communities and sustained themselves. And that idea of the places where we live and how that shapes our sense of possibility in the world and our vision of, you know, who we are and our community. I think there's something that is very attractive about that possibility of doing some kind of larger scale development in terms of communities. So we'll
Like
see.
maybe possibly rebuilding a neighborhood in a way, like through real
Something
estate.
like that. Yeah,
Oh, that's
absolutely.
amazing. Yeah. You know, and I think it's so funny because I would love to even hear more of those stories. I believe growing up, just to be transparent, I didn't learn much about Black history until I got to college, right? And so I feel
Right.
like even,
Nobody did.
you know,
Yeah.
in college, and I think now being, you know, as I continue to get older, I'm always learning about more and more. And even this whole idea of like Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street, like was like, what? But I also know that even as you're stating, that's not the only space that we've built and we've been able to thrive. And I believe that it's just important when we hear those types of stories, I believe it's inspiring for us because it's been done. So if it's been done, it can be replicated. But then also just being able to know another side of what we are, you know? And so I would love
Absolutely.
that. You say you've heard of other areas. I would even personally
Many,
want to
many,
go
many, many Black towns. Many Black towns. In fact, I'm going to give a plug to a young lady. Think her name is Erica Buddington, and she's got a website called Langston League, and she named after Langston Hughes. And she talked about a town in Alabama, way before Tulsa, that was a thriving Black community that is now, you know, like so many of our communities, defunct. But it's just there's so many places that we have built, so many things that we've done that we don't even know. Uh, you know, the smallest percentage is what we know. We know a few names, we know a few stories, and that's pretty much it. And that's what I mean by cultivating a sense of curiosity and not allowing what's on the surface just to be the thing that you take as the whole story. There's
Yeah,
so many levels to who we are that I really hope that our children are inspired to explore.
I love it. I'm going to look into that. It's called Langston League.
Yeah.
Okay, definitely going to look into that. And so, as you see a site where you can continue to learn more about Natasha, but is there anything that beyond this website that people can do, or you would like them to go to just stay up to date of what's happening with you?
Um, the website I would say is the most up to date, but I haven't updated my website in a long time. So a couple of things that are upcoming is I am the author or the creator and the developer of a podcast called Opal Watson Private Eye, and it takes place in Chicago. It's about an African American girl who's a detective. You can check that out on pinna.fm. It's a audio streaming, kids audio streaming site. It is
Can
subscription
you say the
based, so,
title
but you
one
may
more time? Okay,
PINNA.FM, and
cool.
as in FM radio. And it's subscription based, but you may be able to listen to 1 or 2 episodes. So that's one thing you can do. And I don't know, I'd be curious about what people are interested in reading, what they are interested in seeing. I'm always curious to have that kind of dialogue going with readers and parents and families. So
Awesome.
shoot me an email.
How could they share? I was gonna say, how can they share their ideas possibly with you?
My website is probably the best way to do it. My email is up there, so you can send me an email.
Awesome. So those who are listening, if you are an aspiring writer, you have an idea, you think you have a storyline that Natasha will be interested in, go to her website as you see below and contact her. As you saw in the chat, please make sure you enter for the book raffle so we can contact you and make sure that you win a copy of her writings. And again, Natasha, this has been a joy to have a conversation with you. I hope once we get out of this pandemic, I can meet you sometime in person. So you are now in Chicago. You plan on this being where you are for a little while, or?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone who's been listening and watching. We appreciate you tuning in, and hopefully you will be able to continue to learn more about Miss Tarpley's work. And thank you for the front row. Thank you all for joining in. Take care.
All right, take care. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.